911, where's your emergency? You said somebody took no sugar, please. I'll say it quick. Hey, what's going on? Sir.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we have another story, and this story is about a girl named Marlisa Wells. Marlisa Wells was a 16-year-old young lady, and she lived in Austin, Georgia. Marlisa Wells was a bright young lady. Her mother described her smile as an infectious smile. I mean, any room Marlisa walked in, she brightened up the atmosphere. She brightened up the room. Now, Marlisa would later be sent to live with her grandparents. Her mother figured that Marlisa would get the best education and live in a wonderful community. And also, her mother wanted the best for her. So, of course, she sent Marlisa to live with the grandparents. Now, her grandparents would do anything for Marlisa. They were very active in her life, and they enjoyed her being there. Now, Marlisa felt like her grandparents was a little strict, as like teenagers, a little too strict. You know how teenagers just want to do things, and her grandparents was the type of grandparents that would allow her to do things, but they would have to know the people first or meet the person. Like, the grandparents were literally those type of grandparents, and they wanted the best for her as well as her mother. So they would expect her to follow the rules and follow directions. Now, Marlisa had friends. She went to school. She enjoyed living with her grandparents. But unfortunately, Marlisa would meet somebody that would turn her whole world around. Now, Marlisa will be found stabbed to death in her grandparents' home January 19th, 2008. Her grandparents would make a frantic call to the police. I mean, her grandfather was pouring down with tears, talking to the dispatchers, telling the dispatchers to please send help. His granddaughter had been stabbed. This is the recording.
Austin 911, where's your emergency? You said somebody took no sugar, please. I'll say it quick. Hey, what's going on? Sir.
Once police and investigators got there, Marlisa was pronounced dead on the scene. Marlisa had died in her grandparents' arms. Such a tragic event and devastating. Marlisa was a kind girl. Who would want to murder her? The first thing investigators did was start talking to neighbors, people around. And one neighbor said they used to see Marlisa sneaking a guy into her grandparents' back door. So they had to start somewhere. So they start reaching out to friends and stuff of Marlisa and run into one of Marlisa's best friends, Soraya. Soraya will go on to tell police that Marlisa was dating a guy named Matthew. Now, Matthew Wilkins was supposed to be Marlisa's boyfriend, but Soraya said that she had never met this Matthew, but Marlisa would tell her all of this stuff about Matthew. She adored Matthew, and Soraya said she wasn't afraid to shout it to the world. But unfortunately, she would be afraid to shout it to her grandparents because her grandparents were strict. They didn't want her to have a boyfriend at 16. They wanted her to focus on her studies and become the best version of herself. So, of course, Marlisa kept this a secret from her grandparents. Now, Soraya also states that she will also talk to, him on the phone. So Soraya knew a lot. Of course, why not? She was Marlisa's best friend. But whether Matthew killed Marlisa or not, she didn't know. Now, detectives and police start trying to investigate who this Matthew guy was. Now, unfortunately, they could not find Marlissa's cell phone at the scene of the crime. But what they did find is a trash can, blood, like a person was dragged from the bathroom, and knives inside of a trash can. So the knives was inside of the trash can. Blood was being like uh dragged, like they Marlissa was dragged from the bathroom. So they did find evidence of what killed Marlissa, but they just couldn't find her phone. Now, eventually they start digging deep down into the whole situation and realize that Marlissa had been talking to a guy named Matthew. After they was able to pour Marlissa's records, phone records. So they reached out to Matthew. Now, they didn't expect Matthew as the killer because, of course, Matthew was away at school, so they thought. Now, Matthew was a 19-year-old boy, and he was in high school like Marlissa. He was in college now as a freshman, and he was a great basketball player. A lot of people, like friends and family, respected Matthew. He was very popular in school. Now, Matthew attended Abraham Baldwin Agriculture College. But they was thinking that Matthew was there. And that college is like maybe 3 hours, a couple of hours away. So there's no way that Matthew would be a suspect. Well, guess what? Investigators found out that Matthew was at his childhood house. He was not at college. He was actually in the area at the time. So they went to interview Matthew, but Matthew's mother said that her son was not talking until he gets a lawyer. So police had to back off. But in the meantime, in between times, officers and investigators got a search warrant for Matthew's house. While they're waiting on a lawyer, the law was suiting up to search. So they went back the next day, presented Matthew's parents with this search warrant, and they went through the house searching. Now, at first, they couldn't find any evidence, but they eventually found some shoes and clothes behind a furnace. They grabbed the evidence and they take it in for forensics to see if this could be possibly anything that has something to do with Marlissa's murder. Now, while they are waiting, Matthew suits up with a lawyer, and investigators and stuff start interviewing him. Matthew did not want to talk at all. But guess what? The forensics had now came back, and they had found that Marlissa's blood was splattered all over these clothes and shoes. Bam. So now Matthew is wanting to talk. And before Matthew started talking, they went to Soraya again to see if Soraya knew any more details. Soraya told police that Marlissa had also told her that she was pregnant. Now, a huge term. So now that they got this, they know to make sure to put this in question when questioning Matthew. But before they do, they had to let the family know about Marlissa's situation. Now, unfortunately, the family didn't even know that Marlissa was pregnant. And of course, Marlissa wasn't going to tell her grandparents. Of course, they wanted the best for her. And her being pregnant at 16, Marlissa just felt like that they would have been devastated. And most often parents would be, because of course Marlissa was 16, but at the same time she hadn't even experienced life herself. So now investigators are questioning Matthew again, and Matthew just started talking. I mean, he didn't even attempt to prolong it. Why? They already had evidence that Matthew did something to Marlisa the day of her murder. And plus, Marlisa did see him. They got her records and seen that Matthew and Marlisa had been talking back and forth all the way up until the day she was killed. Now, mind you, Marlisa had to keep Matthew a secret because come to find out, Matthew had a girlfriend, a main girl. And when the girlfriend found out about Marlisa, the girlfriend dumped Matthew. Now, the girl did get questioned in the beginning, but they had already ruled Matthew's main girl out because she was at work the whole day that Marlisa was killed. But not only that, she stated, why would she do anything to her? Yes, she knew Marlisa, but at the same time, she would not kill her. She just removed herself from the situation. So she was not a suspect at all. But now that detectives have questioned Matthew finally talked. Matthew stated how he felt like a baby would ruin his life. And when Marlisa told him, he was devastated and he had to figure out what to do. Now, he felt like his only option was to get rid of her. And so Matthew set out to do just that. Matthew talked her into allowing him to come over. And like always, Melissa would sneak him in the house. Now, even forensics said this, that Matthew and Marlisa did have relations the day of Marlisa's murder. So he had relations with her, lowered her in, and then killed her. So he stabbed her and also stabbed her with a fork because she had head injuries. She had been stabbed 60 to 70 times and stabbed in her back with a fork. So he was literally setting out to get rid of Marlisa and the baby. Now, unfortunately for Matthew, they did forensics and everything, DNA and everything on Marlisa, and determined that Marlisa was never pregnant in the first place. So Marlisa wound up losing her life, and she wasn't even pregnant. So Matthew threw his own life away and Marlisa's life based on the assumption of Marlisa being pregnant. Now, he also stated that he felt like a baby would ruin his life, and yes, he did. So Matthew confessed to all that he was questioned on. He also said that was the only way he knew to handle the situation. It definitely wasn't. You just chose to choose that route. Like, why kill her because she was pregnant? I mean, it was just gonna mess up your life even worse. But hey, but that's what he stated. So Matthew wound up going to trial, and Matthew wound up being found guilty for every charge they threw at him. Matthew would serve 20 years to life in prison. Unfortunately, this event was uncalled for. Melissa would lose her life in the hands of a person that she was willing to keep a secret in order to still be with him. Melissa loved her son Matthew, and she didn't want nobody or nothing to come in between them. She wound up losing her life on the assumption that she was pregnant. And Matthew wound up throwing his whole life away, thinking that getting rid of her would solve a problem, but unfortunately make a problem worse. You guys, I want to pray for the families of both of these people, because being young, you don't think that these things could possibly happen to you. And unfortunately, family members are left with the broken pieces and being brokenhearted. Melissa could not stop her feelings for Matthew, but unfortunately, she lost her life in the process. You guys, let's just pray for this family and her friends, and pray that Matthew would basically be able to sit and think about his consequences and the repercussions of him deciding to take Melissa's life. Thanks for watching, you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and definitely subscribe to my channel. Peace.